You are listening to the New Book of Daniel podcast. Hello and welcome to the New Book of Daniel podcast. My name is Daniel Bobinsky. I'll be your host on this adventure. Today we have with us special guest, Dr. Karlyn Borysenko. You may have seen her on Fox and Friends. You may have seen her on Dave Rubin, but yes, she even comes on the New Book of Daniel show. We're very honored to have her with you. Welcome, Dr. Karlyn.
Well, thank you, Daniel. And you were one of the first people that I really connected with in the conservative movement. I mean, we ran into each other at CPAC, and we have very similar professional backgrounds. And so I do enjoy when we get the chance to chat.
And we had a great time talking at CPAC, and we had done some little recording there, and I'm so wishing that had took well. I wish the recording system had worked. How about that? And even today, I'm hearing a little static on the air, so I'm not sure how well this is going to record, but we'll just fly with it. Because I'm watching Twitter this morning, and I saw you were on Twitter too. The news is flying faster than we can keep up with. What's your take on what's going on?
Oh my God, it's so insane, isn't it? So, we're recording this when the election is still in limbo, and they've just had a big press conference with Trump's legal team. And it sounded like, I haven't followed up on the press conference yet, but it seems as though, I don't want to say it's a Kraken, but it seems as though they dropped a lot on people in this press conference. So it's so insane to keep up with the news right now. And I think from my perspective of being someone that was on the left and, had the realization of how much the media was lying to me, I think that the biggest thing that I'm really concerned about right now is going to primary sources as much as I can and making sure I have a very clear idea of what is actually happening, because both the left and the right, we have to be honest about it, they both spin things in the direction that they want things spun in. And I think it's really important, especially in times like this where there's just so much information, that people need to be really sure of what they're seeing. And it's sometimes hard to know which sources to trust, quite frankly.
It is. You have to do the research, but like you said, you need to do the research. Just this morning, a friend of mine said, when someone says, prove your point, it's like you respond with, well, let's see, I've got about a 10-second relationship with you. I haven't liked any of those 10 seconds, and I'm supposed to do your work for you? Go do your own work.
Exactly.
And
even if you do the work, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I think you're going to say what I was going to say. Go ahead.
Oh, well, I think that even when you do the work for them, they don't want to hear about it. I remember, I was really trying with a couple of my Facebook friends right directly after the election to try to explain to them that all of a sudden at around 4 a.m. in Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, they all of a sudden had hundreds of thousands of votes for Joe Biden out
Amazing.
of nowhere. And this is very, very clear if you actually look at the primary sources. It's very clear if you go to the election sites, and all of a sudden Joe Biden had a huge boost in votes out of these cities where, that's just not statistically possible. And what happened when I tried to explain this to them, and I even provided them links, I said, go look for yourself. Don't take my word for it. Go look for yourself. What they did is they went to Google, and they found something on CNN or the New York Times saying election fraud does not exist, Karlyn. And so it's like, people really don't want to know. And I think there's also something to be said for a lot of the cognitive dissonance that takes place when people who want to believe in the fundamentally good nature of this country to then confront them and say, listen, there's like massive voter fraud going on. People don't want to hear that. And I think that, instead of, I think a lot of people are not dealing with that cognitive dissonance well, and they're kind of retreating back and looking at that New York Times headline that says, no evidence of voter fraud found. We called all 50 states and there's just no evidence of it. And they want to believe that because that aligns with how they want to perceive the world. And no one can wake you up from a prison that you've created for yourself. And so, we just have to trust that in time, maybe they'll wake up, maybe they won't.
So one time I'm having a conversation with a guy, and he says, well, prove your point. So, okay, this is back before I stopped doing it, but at the time I did it. And so I went and I found 2 sources that backed up what I was saying. And his next response was, I don't believe those sources. Until I see it on CNN, I don't believe it. And I'm thinking,
exactly.
Okay, so you're going to go to the Third Reich, and you're going to ask, are you guys gassing Jews in the gas chambers? Oh, no. see, they said they weren't doing it. So apparently they're not doing it.
Well, it must be true if they said so.
And so I did a little thing, and I thought about having some fun with this. I pulled on a couple of tweets, and I thought we could do a tweet discussion. You're familiar with.
Let's do it.
So those of you who aren't Twitter people, there's this character on Twitter whose handle is Cat Turd. And Cat Turd is hilarious. Now, for those of you, like I said, if you don't follow Twitter, this is going to go, what? Who? Cat Turd is very famous on Twitter, especially in conservative circles. He tweeted something a little bit ago. He says, they underestimated the landslide. They made it too obvious. They think we're stupid. Yesterday, I published a podcast. I did an interview with Anna Timmer. If you remember Anna Timmer, when she did that shout down to Justin Amash at the town hall. She was on the show a couple of days ago, and she was talking about how she did this comparison of votes in Michigan versus votes in Illinois, county by county comparisons. It's amazing how much more Trump won Michigan. 400,000 more votes in Michigan than he did 4 years ago. 400,000. He won Michigan by only 11,000 votes in 2016. Over 400,000 votes in 2020. And so you see, maybe you've seen that spike where it's here's the Joe votes, and all of a sudden it goes vertical, and then it just continues on the same trajectory. And like Cat Turd says, they underestimated the landslide. Comments from Dr. Karlyn.
Yeah, I absolutely believe that they did. And I was saying up until the election, and because I've been traveling all around the country for months doing walkaway rallies. And, anytime we do a walkaway rally, we are in a predominantly blue area. That's part of the point. We don't really go to red areas that much because that's not a walkaway thing. Walkaways are for people who are leaving the Democratic Party. And so based on just me traveling around and talking to so many people, I always make an effort to just kind of go out of my way just to talk to like everyday people, not the people coming to the rallies necessarily, but just like everyday people to kind of get a sense of what was going on. I really thought that Trump was going to win by a landslide. I didn't think it was going to be close. I thought it was going to be by an awful lot. And so when the returns were coming back on election night, I was like, okay, well, this is pretty much what I thought was going to happen. And he was up by a lot in all of the key states. And then overnight, of course, they found all these mysterious Biden votes that were only for Joe Biden. And so it doesn't at all surprise me to hear about the analysis, because I always thought that Trump was going to do very, very well in this election.
I believe so too. So along those lines, Matt Walking tweeted, experts listed 27 House races as toss-ups, and Republicans won all 27 of those. Amazing.
Yeah.
And you would
think.
Well,
and isn't that incredible that it happened? Isn't it incredible that happened? I mean, in areas where Donald Trump ended up, losing according to the votes that came back, but mysteriously they're winning all these House races.
The logic just isn't there. It isn't there, and it's unfortunate that we can't necessarily, at least the equipment that you and I have, we can't prove it. Hopefully, Sidney Powell and her team and Rudy Giuliani can prove it as they release their Kraken. But we have people voting. How can you vote straight Republican and then, I want to vote for fewer rights and higher taxes and blah, blah, blah? It doesn't make sense to me at all. You would think that the people who are on the political left, or maybe those in the middle who are undecided and don't like Donald Trump because they've been gaslit, they've believed the lies, you would think that they would look at this and go, and scratch their head a little bit. My technique, by the way, for this, Karlyn, is to, instead of making statements on Facebook and whatnot, when I've got the platforms in which I have a lot of people on both sides of the aisle, I just pose questions. What's the likelihood of this happening? What are your thoughts if this happened? And this kind of gets people thinking by asking questions. Anyways, can we shift gears to masks?
You're much more diplomatic than I am.
Oh, yes, I've noticed you're a little
masks.
bit,
I hate masks.
Your personality is a little bit different than mine. You do get a little brash at times, which I respect. I like what you do.
That's okay to say it.
I like what you do.
Well, I think it's important to distinguish. There are times when I'm actually trying to change someone's mind, and there are times when I know that it doesn't really matter what I say, and I think that it's just a matter of, like, I believe in sticking up for what I believe in and saying what I think, and if it doesn't make people happy, then fine. But when I'm actually trying to change someone's mind, I do tend to ask questions like you do.
Posing the questions. Let's shift the topic to masks a little bit here.
Let's do it.
Mr. Cory Booker has come out and said that masks, to wear masks is an act of love. And someone said, you know what? I'm tired of men beating me up and telling me they're doing it because they love me. I thought that was a great response. What's your, now I've not talked to you at all. I've not tracked you on your position on masks. Where are you at on that?
Oh, I'm very anti-mask. Well, and that's that's not a completely true statement. I believe that people should be able to make a choice for themselves about whether or not they want to wear a mask. I believe it should be their choice. I don't believe that we should be able to be dictating what people wear on their bodies. And my position on masks is really simple, and I've been very consistent about this position since March. I believe that masks are really dehumanizing. I believe that they inhibit expression. Expression for me is something that I've always cared about. People standing up, saying what they think. And when you're wearing something literally over your mouth all day, every day for some people, that is going to really inhibit your inclination to express yourself, to say what you think. And I think that that's actually part of the point. Masks are about power and control and forcing people to wear something because I said so. And by extension, they're basically, I even have a mask that I sold in my online store for a while that says, "This is to silence you." That's what I believe that masks are about. It's about you do what we tell you to do. Now, I have no problem with anyone who chooses to wear a mask. I won't shame them. I won't call them horrible names. Some people do. I don't see the point in that.
Right.
But I'm getting really, really sick of these absurd rules where, like, I fly every single week and it's absurd. Like, you mean that it's completely okay for me to take my mask down to eat a pretzel or something, but then I have to have it on for the rest of the thing? I mean, I'm at the point right now with airplanes where I literally will buy a bag of snacks and just sit there and eat them the entire flight. I'm probably gaining a boat ton of weight from this, but I don't care because I don't have to put my mask on while I'm eating. And, to say that that's perfectly safe, I mean, just makes no sense.
Are you familiar with Michael Knowles? He's a podcaster
Yes.
with the Daily Wire. He described being on a
Mm-hmm.
flight where he noticed that everybody gets on wearing their mask. And as soon as they got on the plane, they sat down, they took their masks and they pulled them down across their chin, right? Most of the people did.
Mm-hmm.
And so he decided to do the same thing. He brings his mask down here. And he's eating his pretzels, as you say. And then he thought, you know what? This is silly. And he just took his mask off. And within a minute, a flight attendant comes up and chides him for not wearing his mask. And if he doesn't put his mask back on, then he's going to be banned from that airlines forever. And so he puts the mask back on and puts it over his chin, not covering his mouth or his nose or anything. He just puts it back on, and then she leaves him alone. It's theater.
So
it's theater. I created a meme the other day.
It's absolute theater.
I created a meme, guys, a picture of Nancy Pelosi wearing a mask. And I said, and I titled it, "Why Nancy Pelosi Wears a Mask." And then inside, I had a little arrow pointing to the mask that says that the inside is sprayed with the scent of laundered money. And that got a good, I posted that on MeWe, and that got a good response. And someone else commented, "No, she wears it to keep her dentures in place." So I thought that was a good response as well. Anyways, masks, yes, that's... Go ahead.
Let me make one more point about the masks on airplanes too. I'll give you another example of how much of theater this is on airplanes. So I'm in a place now because I've been traveling so much that I end up getting like a lot of like first class upgrades, which is always nice. But then you're sitting like right up in the front, and so you can see into the little area where the flight attendants are. I cannot tell you how many times the flight attendants will completely take their masks off when no one else on the plane can see them, or when they're making announcements. They will literally be making announcements saying to the plane, "If you don't keep your mask on, we will, you'll be banned from future flights." And they're doing it without their mask on. It's so absurd. It's crazy. And they don't, by the way, they don't actually bother people in first class as much. They leave first class pretty much alone to do what they want, which is also always nice as well.
Yes. Well, that mirrors Soviet tactics anyways. If you're in the upper echelon, then you can do what you want. The peasants have to listen. Interestingly enough, my wife posted a study on Facebook the other day where there was a group of guys who had studied some counties where mask mandates were put in place. And they wrote a paper and they published it that masks work because the number of COVID cases went down. Well, the masks rule remained in place, and then the number of COVID cases started rising again. So they retracted their study. And they said, obviously we were wrong because we're getting this, right? So she posted that on Facebook, that they retracted their study. That's all she did. And Facebook labeled it as false information, saying that masks do work. And it's hilarious. It's like, you can't make this stuff up. These guys, all she did was post the notice that said these guys retracted their study because they found it didn't work. It's getting to be conditioning. It's conditioning. And you're an organizational psychologist, and I'm in the same field as you.
Yeah.
This is painting a picture of a future society, and this is the kind of thing that we're up against. So that leads us to this vaccine thing, right? Because I think that's where this is going. So one of our state representatives here in Idaho just posted something that says, the stupidest idea in the world is thinking that a healthy person breathing is going to endanger your health. And then I retweeted that or reposted it and said, and the second stupidest thing is the idea that Bill Gates and his puppets at the World Health Organization and the CDC actually give a damn about our health. These guys are financially invested. And I've written about this already. So if anybody wants to challenge me on this, they can go to my columns. I'm not going to sit here and recite it, just per our previous conversation. But Bill Gates is heavily invested in the manufacture of vaccines. They bragged about it for years, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So I see this, and I want to get your thoughts on this. I see this as an effort. It's a psychological push on a global scale to get people used to wearing masks under mandate. And then once the vaccine comes out and you get your immunity passport, which Bill Gates is also invested in the creation of that, and Facebook, Twitter, you can flag this all you want. Go look it up for yourself. I ain't doing your homework for you. But once they get this vaccine popularized, you can take off your mask after you get your vaccine. And now it's vaccines. And my team crunched the numbers that if the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation will probably earn about $1 billion a year if 70% of the world gets vaccinated one time a year. So if they get vaccinated twice a year, now the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
Wait, we have to get vaccinated multiple times?
They're now saying that with this particular vaccine, it's a double thing where you have to get vaccinated once and then you got to get vaccinated again 4 weeks later with the same vaccine. It's a double.
Wow. I didn't know that. I hadn't been following that closely because I just figured that I was going to be forced to take it at some point if I wanted to get on a plane. Yeah, the whole vaccine thing, I have mixed feelings about it because I've never been one of these persons that's necessarily against vaccines. I completely understand that position. I think that vaccines can be a good thing, and I don't know. I really do have mixed feelings about it. Like, part of me is like, they've really rushed this. Do I really want to put that in my body? Do I trust it? I mean, I don't think it's necessarily trustworthy with the speed that this has been developed and how they're doing the testing. I have a lot of questions about that. I also find it to be really alarming that, the reality is that we're going to be forced to have one of these vaccines if we want to be able to do basic human things. That's just going to be what it is. They're going to require proof of vaccine if we're going to get on a plane or travel or do anything fun. And to me, that like honestly like really sucks. For lack of a better word, it like really sucks. And I feel like, as just an average person who has not looked into this issue as much as you do, I feel like I'm between a rock and a hard place because I do like to travel. I travel all the time and I want to be able to keep doing it. And it's like I feel like I have my back against the wall to take this vaccine, which I'm not entirely sure is a good idea.
Yeah, I think you nailed it when you said it's been really rushed. And there's so many companies that are trying to create it because they see the dollar signs affiliated with it. What bothers me, and I know you come to the political senses from the far left. You came to the right, or at least to the center right. And I kind of ping-ponged in my career. I started off left, I went right, far right, and now I'm kind of in the middle. And it's like, I look at what Trump has done with the um, bringing in the military to issue this vaccine, to distribute it. That scares me. And I actually wrote open letter to President Trump over at uncoverdc.com saying, whoa, stop, don't do this. I trust my immune system. We got a 99.5+% recovery rate, and only 15% of the population has been exposed to it. That comes down with symptoms, and only 4% of those end up with hospitalizations. And then the recovery rate, so it makes no sense. If my body can overcome a virus, then why do I need a vaccine for it? You and I talked about this back in March. This is basically a virulent flu, and for decades we've had flu season. We never shut down the society for a flu season.
Oh yeah, it's absurd. Like, I have never once been afraid of getting this virus because I think I would probably be fine. I mean, and maybe I wouldn't, but the fact of the matter is that you can get sick doing any number of things. Like, I mean, people are still smoking. Like, I mean, smoking causes cancer. Cancer is a lot more deadly than this virus is. And so it's just never something I've been really scared of. And one of the things that's so alarming to me is just seeing how terrified people are of this and how many people have stopped living their lives because the media has convinced them that this is just this deadly epidemic when it frankly is not. It absolutely is not. Now, is it more dangerous for people who are older or who have other conditions? Sure, absolutely. And we should be doing everything we can to protect them, which does not involve, like what happened in Michigan and New York, housing COVID patients in nursing homes. That was the call of the Democrats. And that, I mean, we've seen that Governor Whitmer in Michigan was responsible for an awful lot of deaths in that state when she, against the advice of her own nursing association, chose to house COVID patients in nursing homes in Michigan. And of course, did they face any consequences for that? No, because they've got the media in their back pocket. But the rest of us are expected to be terrified to go out and live our everyday lives. It is absolutely absurd to me. Next week is Thanksgiving. I don't have a family Thanksgiving. I just cook for my husband and our dogs, and we have leftover turkey for days. But, people are afraid to have family members over to their house. And as someone who grew up having big family Thanksgivings, because I have a really big family back in Vermont, that to me is one of the saddest things in the world. We should not stop living our lives over a virus.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You were talking earlier about masks. Yesterday, someone came to the door, a lady that my wife knows very well and has known for decades. And she came to the door, and my wife didn't recognize her because she had a mask on her face. All you could see was her eyes. Mm-hmm. And my wife was shocked. When she found out who she was, it's like, do I know you? She's known this woman for decades. This whole separation of family thing is crazy.
And it makes me feel terribly too for people in for our senior citizens in nursing homes and facilities that literally cannot see their family. I have a friend of mine that he lives in Los Angeles, but his mother is in a nursing home in Boston. He has been trying to get to Boston to see his mother since April. And she's not getting any younger, and he cannot get into that nursing home. No. And, he lost his father, her husband, a couple of years ago. And he has not been able to visit his mother since April. And that to me is absolutely heartbreaking. I saw a story, I think, maybe about a month ago or so, of these nursing home people, these seniors in nursing homes that actually went on strike and staged their own little protest. And they held signs outside the nursing home saying, "We want to hug our family." And I thought it was the sweetest thing. And the nursing home let them do it, and they made sure that they were safe. But I was like, yes, the seniors are rebelling, and we should respect their wishes because they've lived a long life. They have a lot more wisdom, and they should be able to make decisions about who they can see.
This is an argument against socialized medicine, in my opinion, because you have the Governor Whitmers and the Governor Cuomo's who sent the people to the nursing homes basically to their death, where they had to die alone. And now I actually saw something this morning that the pendulum swung the other way, where here's an elderly man who lives alone, had surgery, and when he got discharged, instead of sending him to a place where he could have other care, they sent him home. They didn't send him to a place where he could be taken care of. They just sent him home, and he lives alone. And medicine is just going well, my term for it is the global medical establishment or the global industrial complex. You have the medical industrial complex, where they've realized that because of health, and they can say this, because of health, we must make sure everybody's healthy. And maybe you've seen these similar questions where you have, why are we shutting down 20%, 80% of our economy, just so that 20% of our economy doesn't get overwhelmed? Now, so you're an organizational psychologist. I've been doing executive
Yes.
coaching and corporate workplace consulting for 30 years. I'm a certified behavioral analyst. I do DISC assessments and motivator assessments.
Oh, I do DISC assessments too.
Cognitive assessments. Excellent. So, you probably had the same experience. When I'm finishing up with a client right now where they did it right. Everybody on the senior management team did DISC assessments. We did some training around behavioral styles, communication styles, cognitive styles with Myers-Briggs, the whole 9 yards. We did what I call executive triads, where the general manager and all the senior team, we did one-on-ones, and we ironed out all the communication differences. And even in the shutdown, they're not even a COVID industry. They were able to increase sales 25%. They blossomed as a company, right? Now, so here we have an increase. I'm making a comparison here. This company did it right. I have got companies, they'll have me come in and do a DISC workshop or something like this, and they go, okay, thank you very much, bye-bye. But this company really wanted to do it right. They applied what we teach, and they saw the huge benefit from that. So wouldn't it be nice for people like you and me to say, hey, this is mandatory. If you're in business, you need to have these DISC assessments and these executive triads with all your team to improve communication because it's mandatory. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to dictate that to the corporate America, like the medical company can, like the medical industry can?
Well, I think it would be delightful, and it also, benefit the corporate America far more, frankly, than their employees wearing a mask to work or any other nonsense. And I think that people like you and I, we see these results over and over and over again. But I'll shift gears here for a second by going off of your riff here. What basically has been mandated in corporate America right now, which is another thing that really bothers me, is diversity and inclusion training based off of critical race theory. I think after, and this started happening during COVID. I think it started happening after the last time we talked, after George Floyd's death, where, and I don't know if you had this experience, but I absolutely did, is that this whole critical race theory thing and diversity training just took over everything. It took over all of my clients to the point where I really kind of opted out of a lot of my corporate work because I absolutely refuse to shill this type of training. I do not think it's good for teams. I don't think it's good for organizations. And yet it almost became one of those things that organizations had to invest in. Otherwise, their employees were going to rebel against them, and they were going to get mobbed on Twitter for it, which is apparently how we make decisions now. I don't know. Did you have that experience with your clients? Because it was for me, it was overwhelming.
Funny you should say that. Just yesterday morning, I spent an hour on the phone with a guy who makes $250,000 a year. He's an executive in a very large corporation, global, and they're letting him go. Now, before I tell you why, let me tell you that last year, he saved his companies probably about $1 billion by making a couple of decisions. They brought him in on a problem. They were facing a lawsuit. They brought him in. He found a workaround, made it all happen. He personally was responsible for saving his company probably $1 billion. Now, they're letting him go because they need their executive team to be X number gay, X
This is,
number black, X number. Yes, just what you just
I was gonna
described.
say he's a white man, isn't he? He's a white man.
Yep. Yes, he is.
Wow.
And isn't that we brought so much value to the company, so much value to the company, and yet we don't have room for you because we have to do all this inclusionary on our executive team, and we have to do all this training. And he's just shaking his head. He said, this makes no sense. Where is
No.
where is the virtue signaling has just taken over?
It really has, but I do think there's going to be a backlash to this at some point. And I think it's already starting. I mean, we're already seeing companies basically come out like Red Bull was one of the companies that actually fired some of their North American people because they were trying to push this diversity training. And the CEO was like, no, not in my company. Get out. Coinbase is another company that very recently actually wrote a memo to all their employees saying, we are not doing woke nonsense. We are doing our jobs. And if that's not good enough for you, here's a severance package that you are more than happy to avail yourselves of so that you don't have to be here. And it was a very generous severance package. I mean, they basically paid people like 4 to 6 months of salary to quit, which is an incredibly generous severance package. And what they found is that only 5% of their employees took them up on it. And I would bet that at least half those employees were thinking about leaving anyway, and it was just like a nice opportunity. It wasn't because necessarily of the woke stuff, but if you're going to leave anyway, like leaving with 4 to 6 months of salary is like not the worst way in the world to leave. But I there's a long way of saying that I do think we're starting to see a backlash to this because there's no evidence that this diversity training works. I have looked high, Daniel, I have looked high and low for evidence that this diversity training has any bottom line impact at all, and I can't find it. And I mean, I would welcome if you have seen something differently, but what I have seen is there is evidence that organizations are actually better off doing nothing than doing this crazy critical race training, diversity training.
Well, to that point, I have a friend who wrote a book on diversity. And when we say diversity in this sentence, we're talking about cultural diversity. And I was doing a training and I asked her to come join me. She happened to be in town. And I said, well, I'm doing this training over at this company. Why don't you come join me? We'll tag team, we'll do some stuff. So happened that on that day, I was going over the DISC workshop, the DISC stuff, the differences in communication styles and behavioral styles. And she sat through that. And on the drive back, she says, that is the real diversity training.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Because,
and I've actually tried to sell that to organizations. Yeah.
Because, and you've traveled around the world. I've traveled around the world. I remember sitting on a bus in Korea looking out the window, and I'm watching these people whose language I cannot even understand, but I'm watching them talk, and I'm going, okay, there's the core D, and there's the core I, and there's the core S, and there's the core C. It really is a universal language. It is the universal diversity training. So if companies want to talk about diversity training, hire Karlyn or hire me. We'll bring it to you.
Maybe we'll tag team in training at some point because we have very different styles, and so it might actually be beneficial. But no, I 100% agree with you. I think that and this is an argument that I've tried to make to a couple of clients now, and no one's bitten just yet on this particular argument, but I'm not giving up. Which is that if you want real diversity in your organization, well, you've got to think about diversity of work style, diversity of approach, diversity of thought. And what we know from the DISC model, and the DISC model has millions of different inputs into it, depending on which company you use to run the reports. There are some better than others, but right. I mean there are millions of there's a very large data set for this. And what we found is that race has nothing to do with your work style. Gender has very little microscopic to do with your work style, but it's not actually a statistically significant difference. It basically has nothing to do with it. Age has nothing to do with it. It has nothing to do with any of these other elements, these immutable characteristics that people think of when it comes to diversity. Your work style is your work style. It's just how you show up, how you communicate, how fast you work. Do you tend to be more open? Do you tend to be more challenging? And these things exist outside of all of these immutable characteristics that the left is trying to get us to define ourselves as. So I 100% agree with you. The best diversity training is around thought and approach. I actually had a client one time where it was so funny because if you looked at this group, every single one of them looked differently. If it was a beautifully diverse group based on skin color, based on gender, based on all of these things, 80% of them had the I work style. 80% of them. In
Wow.
this one group, which I had never seen anything like that before. Typically, you're going to have something that's pretty distributed, but the fact that it was such a homogeneous group in terms of work style, that created so many problems for the team,
I'll
and they
bet.
needed to infuse more different work styles. Yeah.
I'm gonna interrupt real brief for those who aren't familiar with what she just said. The I work style is it's the what if thinker, it's the possibility thinker, it's the gotta have fun thinker. If they're stuck in a corner to work on numbers by themselves, they're bored and they go crazy. They need to interact. They need to have fun. And you just said 80% of them. 80% were
80% of them were I's.
core eyes. Oh my gosh! Did they get
And
anything done?
oh God. Not really. And that was part of the problem is they were all chatty Cathys all day, and they were all people pleasers too, because they just wanted to make everyone happy. They were very concerned about that. And you had this poor guy, this one CD, like is a combination of the C style and the D style, that was just like, he was always seen as the curmudgeon of the group, even though he was the one that was bringing up the problems that needed to actually be solved, because that's what the more conscientious work styles do, is they're very good at identifying problems, but not always the most diplomatic in terms of articulating those problems.
Well said.
So he was basically the outcast from the group that was like the curmudgeon.
Yeah, that is amazing that they actually got anything done at all. I can't imagine an 80% core I group. Wow. That is weird. So yeah, so if you're watching this podcast and you want to bring your team together to a much more effective team, this will turn a little advertisement. Contact Dr. Karlyn, contact myself. Maybe contact us both. We'll tag team. I've done that a lot.
We will.
I've brought people into tag team because it's kind of cool to see. I mean, when I have my co-presenter presenting, they're saying the same thing that I'm saying, but with different words. The concepts are there. And some people will connect better with that. And your style is much different than my style. So that would be actually very engaging to have that kind of thing. So yeah, hire us both. We'll have fun.
Yeah. Sounds like a plan.
That would mean I might have to fly somewhere. Gosh, I've kind of sworn off masks. I'm not sure I could do that. I might have to drive.
Oh, it's really not that bad. I've taken to wearing like MAGA masks and Trump masks just to like annoy people, because I'm like, if you're going to make me go through this absurd exercise, I'm going to wear the mask that is going to annoy you the absolute most.
I will probably handwrite.
It's really not that bad. And
I'm going to handwrite on my mask. This mask has no scientific proof. I'm wearing it to make you feel better. And that's what I'm going to wear.
There you go. I've seen people with like security blanket on their mask before, and I mean, and the thing of it is too is that there are so many places out there right now where people are really just not feeling the mask anymore. So you can actually travel. Like Florida is one of those places where no one cares. Nashville is one of those places where like every single Uber driver I had when I was in Nashville was like, I don't care if you wear the mask, and I frankly would prefer if you didn't. And so like I think a lot of people are just getting fed up with it, and that frankly gives me hope that the broader population is not being indoctrinated into this stuff in the way that people like you and I might believe that they could easily be. Sure, there are mask people that just like if you're not wearing a mask, they're going to yell at you and they're going to get it right up in your face, as though there's no irony to that situation. But I think a lot of people are over it at this point.
Well, to that point, I think that some people do want to wear a mask. And as you said earlier, I'm not opposed to that. Just like I gave the example about the guy who lives alone, and we have healthcare that are so global, and it's just big policies that are blanket policies that you can't address individual needs. In the same way, you don't know who wears a mask for a good reason or not. Maybe they are sick and they don't want to spread it. Maybe they do have a genuine fear. Let them wear a mask.
And that's sad. Yeah, everyone should be able to do exactly what they want to do. I mean, we live in a free country. And that is the very basis of it. Like, we live in a free country, and I should not be able to make decisions for you, and you should not be able to make decisions for me. And we are all adults. We should all be dictating our own lives. And if you don't want to be around people that aren't wearing a mask, well, you don't have to be. I mean, and you know what the thing is too? I was thinking about this because it wasn't until like July that all of the supermarkets around me mandated masks. Before that, there were absolutely supermarkets I could go into where I didn't have to wear a mask, and it was great. And in those supermarkets where I didn't have to wear a mask, guess what people did? they socially distanced. So I never got within 6 feet of any other person, and I made an effort to do that. I'm actually very persnickety about social distancing. This is one of the reasons I don't like flying, at least on American, because they pack everyone in on American. On Delta, they actually leave seats open, so it's a little bit nicer. But I really do take social distancing very seriously when I'm around people that I don't know. And so what it used to be in the supermarkets before they mandated masks, everyone was socially distanced, everyone was fine. The minute that the supermarket started mandating that people wear masks, no one was social distancing anymore. Everyone was right on top of each other. Everyone, no one's even wearing the mask correctly because everyone has it down under their nose. Social distancing just went completely out the window. It's like people forgot instantly.
Total theater.
Crazy.
It's theater.
It's total theater.
It's amazing how many people I see walking around the stores with their mask like this instead of like this.
Oh yeah.
Their nose hanging out.
Yep.
Yeah, and I've interviewed some
cares.
doctors on this show. Emergency room doctors who know it's a joke. They know it's theater. They wear them in the hospital when they're seeing a patient in an exam room.
Mm-hmm.
But that's it. That's it. All right. Well, let's go back to the tweets.
I've talked to so many nurses like that too.
We have. We got a couple more tweets here. Okay, so Sidney Powell. Have you seen anything from Sidney Powell? She was.
I saw that she said the Kraken was released a couple days ago, and I have not seen any Kraken, Sidney. So we'll see.
Did you? Now I didn't watch this morning with the Trump team going in before the courts, but I understand it was kind of Kraken-esque from what I heard. But after we get done recording this, but of course, by the time this hits the air, I'm going to edit this down today and probably tomorrow morning. And today's Thursday, so this will air tomorrow, Friday. But by the time this hits the airwaves, people will already have probably heard some of this stuff. But Sidney, it says here, well, first of all, background. Sidney Powell came on when Michael Flynn's attorneys basically bailed on him. This guy, pure patriot. And they totally framed him. They bullied him. I cannot imagine the depth and the pressure of the bullying that came against him. My philosophy on that is that he knows where a lot of Obama administration skeletons are buried because of what he did during the Obama administration. So he knows where those skeletons are buried. And they didn't want him, when Trump named him to be national security advisor, they didn't want him telling Trump where all the skeletons were buried. So that's why they went after him. But here's a comment, because she's now one of President Trump's advisors too. Sidney Powell has quickly become one of the most important figures in modern American history. What do you think of that, Dr. Karlyn?
I think, it's hard to say because I haven't watched the press conference from today yet either. I mean, certainly what she did with General Flynn was a miracle. And if people haven't seen, the best explanation I have for it is The Plot Against the President, the movie. It's on Amazon Prime. If people haven't seen it, they should go and watch it because I'll be honest, I had a tough time wrapping my head around this whole affair because it's just like there's so many moving pieces. And at some point, Brian, who also contributes to Uncovered DC, explained it to me, and it was still a lot for me to wrap my head around. But it certainly seems as though Sidney Powell is a very, very smart person. I think that, she pulled off a miracle with General Flynn. And I think, fingers crossed that she's able to pull off the same miracle for Trump. And it sounds, from everything that I've heard about this press conference so far, it sounds like she just might do it.
One more question here. Representative Jim Jordan said, Congress must investigate the integrity of the 2020 election. Why don't Democrats agree? It's been decades since I was on the left, Dr. Karlyn. What it's been a year for you, so you're a little more recent in this. Why do you think the Democrats don't want to investigate the integrity of the election? And if they don't, I'm going to assume I understand your answer, but what do you think the ripple effect is going to be when they don't?
I believe that they don't want to investigate because they believe they won. Pure and simple. They believe they won. They've been doing a victory lap for a couple of weeks now. They think that they won, and they don't really care about election integrity. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Let me interrupt. So let's assume that you're right. They believe that they won. Mm-hmm. if they believe they won fair and square, wouldn't they be okay with doing a check?
One would think, but you know, well, I think there's a couple things involved, and I think we have to separate out people who I believe have actual malice from people who I think just believe what CNN and the New York Times tells them. Because I think there's a, what people really need to understand is that there is a big chunk of people on the left who simply have, they are victims of the media as much as people like me, who have, you know, red pilled since then. They're a victim of the media too. They believe what they're being told, and it would frankly be earth shattering for them to understand that these outlets that they trust are lying to them. And so I think we have to put those people in a separate category. I think that they genuinely believe when the New York Times tells them there is no evidence of election fraud, they say, well, why would we investigate it? There's no evidence of election fraud. I know that's the category I was in for a long
Okay.
time. I simply just believed it didn't exist. But I think the much more nefarious category is the people who absolutely know there's election fraud. They know that there's election fraud for years and years and years, and they don't want to investigate because they know it's going to be discovered, or they're afraid that it's going to be discovered. I mean, listen, if Kamala Harris is so confident that they won this election, then why hasn't she resigned her Senate seat yet? I think that's a really good question. They know what's going on, and I think that they're shaking in their boots at what the Trump campaign is doing, because for once there is a Republican that is fighting back. And Daniel, you know this as well as I do. The right doesn't usually fight back. Trump isn't taking this laying down, and I think it's a really good thing. And I think that, you know, I think that this is going to be a scary time, frankly, for a lot of people. If they actually look at the evidence, they're gonna realize that they really have been lied to and they have been duped, and the system has always been rigged. Quite frankly, it's always been rigged. And I think this is going to be one of the most overt instances of it, and that's going to be earth shattering for a lot of people. And I think that that is a really key point to understand in all of this.
Great answer. Great answer. And when President Trump takes on his second term in January 20th, when that happens, I think those people who know that they were cheating and playing the system, I think they're going to get exposed. I think Trump will be, hey, I have no more elections to win. I can just do what I need to do now. And I really hope that he just goes after them with both barrels, and that the Department of Justice wakes up, and that the corruption there gets exposed as well. We have corruption in all of these agencies. And I will spill the beans with you right now here on our podcast. I am working on a book about what Trump needs to do in his second term. And that's actually one of the things that I talk about in the book, is that he needs to gut these agencies at least 25%, get rid of all the people who are not patriots. But we'll talk about more about that in the future. But the other side of the coin is that people that you talked about, where they really believe what the New York Times is telling them, that there is no fraud, and they believe to their core that there is no fraud, that Trump is just lying to them, as Chris Cuomo repeats every day. So I think from those folks, and I'm curious as to what you might think the percentage of people in the population that might be, but I'm curious as to what those folks might do when all this comes down. What's going to happen to them?
Well, that's a really good question. I do believe they're about 80% of the population. I really do. Because statistically, we know that the far left at absolute most makes up like 12 to 15% of the population. So, and I know it always seems like there's more, but I mean, really, that's what the numbers tell us. So I do think it's at least 80% of people who I just think are asleep. They just don't understand. Now, what will those people do? I think if Trump ends up, and I'm kind of in the middle. I'm really trying to manage my expectations around this election right now. I think like I will be overjoyed if Trump is inaugurated. I will be annoyed if Biden is inaugurated, but I think like I've gotten myself to a headspace where I'm kind of okay with both outcomes. But I think for those 80%, if they see Trump get inaugurated, I think what I would hope would happen is it would wake a lot of people up to say, how did the media lie to us so much? And what happened? How did this happen? How did he end up in there again when the media swore to us up and down that Joe Biden was the president-elect and he won it? That's what I would hope would happen. And I think that would happen with a good percentage of them. Now, I think with the percent of the left that we're worried about, I have definitely heard tell from people who know more than I do that one of the reasons that this is taking so long is that they're trying to get the military in order because they're afraid of the civil unrest that's going to happen once it becomes clear that Trump is actually going to be serving a second term. So I think that we are going to see violence. We're going to see rioting. Listen, I was in D.C. this past weekend for the big March for Trump rally, the Million MAGA March, and everything was boarded up. And it wasn't boarded up because of Trump supporters. And we all know that that's the truth. So I think it's going to be, regardless of what happens, the thing that is saddest to me about this entire election is that regardless of what happens, half of the country is not going to believe the outcome. It doesn't matter. Either way, half of the country is not going to believe the outcome. And I think, we're in a transitionary time for the country, and I think it's going to get worse before it gets better.
I would agree with you 100%. It's going to get worse before it gets better. And there's probably a whole other podcast we could do discussing on what needs to happen with the media and all that, because they are lying to us so much. That's a lot of stuff needs to change. All right, so we're going to need to come to kind of a wrap this up. I have a question for you. Now, I got a little bit of a background here. My family homeschools, and my wife teaches actually classes here at the house for families on subjects that they don't want to teach, like science and things like that. A lot of moms don't want to teach science or math, and so my wife is actually very good at that stuff, and so she teaches it, and kids come to the various classes, and their parents come, and it's a nice little time here. We got a large, great room that they can have class in. Well, it turns out last week, one of the girls was saying that her favorite YouTuber is you. And my wife said, hey, well, my husband knows her. And so I talked to her and I said, well, I'm doing a podcast with her next week. Why don't you give me a question if you have any questions, and I'll ask them. So the question that she has for you and is, because people like you who were Democrat, left wing, and you still have a lot of those ideas of left-wing values and those kind of things, but you did the walk away thing, and you swung over to vote for Trump. And I don't know, did you actually register as a Republican?
I'm going to be registering as a Republican. I haven't done it yet just because I haven't gotten around to it.
Gotcha.
But I became an independent after I left, and I will be registering as a Republican.
Okay. So her question is, with people from the left doing the walk away over to the Republican side of the aisle, what do you say or think is going to be the future of the Republican Party with this infusion of people from the left?
Well, and I mean, what a great question. And from someone so young, I mean, that's really, really astute. It shows homeschool works, right? But I think, for me, one of the reasons that I am becoming a Republican, and I think this is really important to understand, because I wasn't going to be. I was perfectly happy kind of sitting in the middle and laughing at both parties and not picking a side. But then I went to the walkaway LGBT throwdown debate in Fort Lauderdale, and, Brandon Strauch and Blair White and Mikey Harlow debated three people on the left about LGBT issues. And Blair White said, we are making change from the inside. The Republican Party is not perfect, but at least we're trying to make change where we can on the inside instead of just complaining about it. And I really thought about that. And, my perception of what has happened to the Republican Party under Donald Trump and how it has evolved from something that I never, ever would have considered joining 4 years ago. Absolutely not. From these stodgy old white neocon men, I never would have associated with it. But what has happened under Trump is it has become more open. It's become a bigger tent where all different types of people are welcome and all different types of ideas are welcome. And I think that is actually a really, really healthy thing. Now, are there people that are more conservative than me in the party? Absolutely. Are some of them happy that I'm going to be joining it? No, they're not. But you know what? The value of the left right now, the value that the right is saying right now is we are the party that we want a diverse set of ideas. We want to be having these discussions. We want to have our ideas challenged. And when we talk about bringing it back to the disc model and real diversity, that's what real diversity looks like, is people of all different backgrounds coming together to say, you know what? We don't agree on all these things, but let's hash it out. And I think that this is a really important evolution of the Republican Party, and it's something that makes it much more powerful when it comes to, frankly, taking down the left and not allowing them to continue to expand, is the fact that there is a place to go. And so that is one of the reasons I'm joining the Republican Party, because I want to be part of solidifying that change. God forbid if Donald Trump doesn't pull this off and we end up with a Biden administration and Trump goes on to buy a news network or do whatever he's going to do. I really fear for what the Republican Party going back to the same way it always was. I do not believe that's going to be healthy for America. And it's something that I think it's very important for everyone that has come to the Republicans under a Trump administration to really put their hands in and say, we are, like, Donald Trump showed us the way. We are not allowing this to go back to where it was before.
Good answer. I like it. I like it. I know, and
Thank you.
As you were talking about the neocons and that kind of stuff, I never felt, from my perspective, that they were true Republicans. I thought that they were walking in as using the Republican Party for a different platform. Because when you look at the Republican platform, what they were advocating and doing did not align with what's written in the Republican platform. And if people want to read it,
right, and
use your fingers and type in what is the Republican platform and go read it for yourself.
Right. Absolutely. And I think that, this is an ongoing discussion that I've had with a lot of people, actually, where my contention is that Trump has effectively created a third party. I think the traditional Republican Party, as existed under the neocons, pre-Trump, we'll say the pre-Trump Republican Party, I think it had gotten to a place where they were establishment, the Democrats were the establishment. Where Trump came in is he was not the establishment candidate. And Trump was a Democrat for a long time. He's never been the most ultra uber conservative person, but he was the anti-establishment person. And so my contention is he effectively created a third party, and now it's time to solidify that. But I certainly have had conversations with people, and they make compelling cases to say that no, what Trump did is he brought the Republican Party back to their original principles. And I think that's a really compelling perspective.
And to kind of wrap a bow on that, Trump is doing what Reagan did. And I believe Reagan is pre-Dr. Karlyn, but I actually served in the military under Reagan.
Just a little bit.
But I served in the military. He was my commander-in-chief. And I remember Sam Donaldson, no friend of the right, reporter for, I believe it was CBS News, but he said what Ronald Reagan does, at least he was intellectually honest. He said what Ronald Reagan does is he makes people glad to be an American again, proud to be an American again. Mm-hmm. And that's what Trump has capitalized on with the whole "Make America Great Again" thing. And when I looked at the mall thing this past weekend that you attended, I don't think it was so much people going rah rah Trump as it was saying rah rah what Trump is trying to maintain for us. That makes sense.
Absolutely. It absolutely does. The most popular chant on the mall on Saturday was USA, 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 people singing the national anthem. I 100% agree with you.
Yeah. It's so people call them, Trump bots or something like that. It's more like, no, we're pro-Constitution. Bring us back to what you said, the principles of America. That's what we're all about. What a great way to end the show. Dr. Karlyn, I very much appreciate you taking the time to come on with us. How can people find you? Of course, you're kind of ubiquitous now in the world. So but for those of you who haven't seen you or met you or know about you, how can they get a hold of you?
Well, the very easiest thing to do is to go to drkarlyn.com. That's DRKARLYN.com. And that's going to have links to all of my social media. The primary social media that I'm really posting a lot on these days is, of course, Twitter. I'm Dr. Karlyn B on Twitter. I do YouTube content almost every single day. Sometimes I take a break, but I do content around news, politics, culture, whatever I feel like ranting about at any given time. So you can find me on YouTube as well.
Okay. Are you active on Parler?
I am active on Parler. I'm just under Karlyn, my first name. I'm also on Gab. I'm on Minds. I'm on Locals. And I like Parler. I do. And I think that there's going to be an exodus to Parler sooner rather than later, to be honest.
Yeah, I know that a lot of folks from Twitter are going to Parler, and a lot of folks from Facebook are heading over to MeWe, which is where I'm spending more time lately. So But yeah, I now refer to Parler and MeWe as the new social media, and Twitter and Facebook is the old social media. So anyways, thanks again for joining with us on the New Book of Daniel show. We will catch you hopefully after the president settles in, and we'll talk some more. How's that?
Sounds like a plan.
All right. Thank you. It is always good to talk with the effervescent Dr. Karlyn Borysenko. That was a great conversation. And you know what? If you are interested in following up with some training for your company with both Dr. Karlyn and myself, that would be a hoot and highly impactful to boot. So if you want to do that, you can send an email to me at newbookofdaniel@outlook.com. In fact, if you want to contact me for any reason, just send an email to newbookofdaniel@outlook.com. You can also find me on all the major social media platforms, such as Parler and MeWe, and then the old-fashioned Twitter and Facebook. And of course, make a comment down below if you'd like in the notes. And of course, while you're down there, go ahead and click the subscribe button and press the little bell. That means you'll get notified when we upload new shows. If you would like to read my writings on anything political and issues of the day, you can do that by going to uncoverdc.com and also Red State. This is Daniel Bobinski with the New Book of Daniel. I thank you very much for listening, and I will catch you on the next show. Until then, be blessed.